Good morning, kids! How are you? Today, we're going to travel to a magical land where princesses and princes have a lot of fun. Do you like princesses? Can you tell me which ones you know? Great! Do you know the story of Cinderella? That is the one we are reading today. Once upon a time, there was a kind and gentle girl named Cinderella. She lived with her mean stepmother and two selfish stepsisters who made her do all the chores. Poor Cinderella wore old clothes and never got to have any fun. The first topic we covered in class is the threefold reality of oral communication. Phonetics states that there are three aspects which coexist and interact in oral communication. These are verbal language, that is what we say, paralanguage, that is how we say it, and kinesics, that is how we move. In the classroom interaction, for example, kinesics can be observed in the gestures in my face, in the movements I make with my body. The verbal aspect is reflected in the spoken words I produce, and paralanguage is present, for example, when I clear my throat and in the intonation I use when speaking. Intonation is an essential component of paralanguage and is the most important topic in this subject. Traditional definitions of intonation are narrow in the sense that they are restricted to pitch movement as the only component. However, in this course, we adopt a broad perspective, which includes several subsystems. According to Brazil, intonation includes key and termination, pauses, prominences, and tones. Key and termination can be defined as pitch height, that is, the step-ups and step-downs of the voice which transmit a certain meaning. Pauses are also relevant. They are used to signal tone units and paratones boundaries. Prominences, they refer to the highlighting of information depending on the common ground between speaker and listener. And tones are defined as pitch movement, that is, the ups and downs of the voice which create a kind of melody when speaking. Another key concept is that of orientation, which refers to the attitude adopted by a speaker to transmit a message to a certain addressee. Orientation may be direct if the focus is on the interaction with the audience, or oblique if the focus is on encoding the message. In the classroom interaction, I adopt a mostly direct orientation in order to persuade my students and catch their attention. I want to establish a connection with them. If I adopted a mostly oblique orientation, then they would probably get bored and lose interest in the lesson. So whenever a teacher is speaking, there should be variation in the use of pitch height choices and a meaningful use of pauses, meaningful use of prominences. I would like to highlight the fact that orientation is a gradient rather than a dichotomy, because speakers can move towards the other orientation from time to time. For example, although I choose to adopt a mostly direct orientation, there may be times when I need to turn to oblique orientation because of hesitations, because I'm looking for the right words to express myself, or because I want to correct myself. Use of direct orientation and management of the threefold reality of oral communication are crucial for the teach-a-talk genre because they help the student to engage in the learning process. Some characteristics of this genre can be observed in the classroom interaction. Since I have longer speaking turns, I make an excessive use of prominent words together with an exaggerated pronunciation and articulation. Intonation plays a crucial role in organizing speech. This organization function implies the segmentation of speech into paratones and tone units and internal choices of key. Let's begin analyzing paratones. In this section we have two different paratones, each one introducing a new topic. In the case of the first one, it introduces the class, and the second one introduces the story. Both paratones are structured the same way. The three slant lines indicate their initial and final boundaries. Both begin with high key, which signals contrast and the beginning of a new topic, and they finish with low termination followed by a relatively long pause, which indicates that we are closing an idea or that we are implying an equative meaning. Within paratones, we have internal key choices, which can be mid, high, and low. Mid key is the unmarked choice used by speakers to convey additive meaning. For example, I used mid key in the second paratone since most tone units are adding information about Cinderella, who she was, who she lived with, what her everyday life was like. Then high key is a marked choice used to convey contrast, emphasis, and surprise. I used high key here, for example, because I want to highlight that it is to a magical land that we are traveling. I want my students to pay attention. Another example is here. Grade is marked with high key as a reaction to the student's response. Then low key is a marked choice used to convey equative meaning. It is used, for example, in clarifications, parenthetical notes, apposition. Segmentation of speech into tone units may be influenced by three criteria. The external criterion refers to the phonetic cues that are present at the actual boundaries, such as pauses, anacrusis, lengthening of final syllables. For example, I have applied the external criterion here. Since there is a pause between the greeting and the question, I have two separate tone units. Then, the internal criterion states that tone units must include at least one prominent syllable and pitch movement. So I can say that I have also applied the internal criterion here, since each tone unit has a tonic syllable, each one carrying a tone. The grammatical criterion states that intonation breaks usually correspond to certain grammatical features, such as heavy noun phrases, vocatives, adverbials, coordinated clauses, among others. For example, in lines 8 and 9, there is an instance of coordination. So there is a boundary between coordinated clauses, and each one deserves its own tone unit. Moreover, in this same sentence, we have a defining relative clause, which, according to this criterion, also deserves its own tone unit. As regards the structure of tone units, their boundaries are marked with two slant lines, and they can be composed of three segments. The tonic segment is obligatory since it bears all the relevant intonational choices, and then the proclitic and enclitic segments are optional. Then the first prominent syllable in a tone unit is called the onset and it's optional, and the last one is called tonic syllable and it is obligatory. If a tone unit has two or more prominent syllables, it is said to be extended, but if it only has one, it is said to be reduced. Let's analyze this tone unit in line 11 in order to illustrate these components. This is a case of an extended tone unit since it has two prominent syllables, the onset ne and the tonic syllable any. The segment stretching from the onset Add to the tonic syllable and including it is the tonic segment. Then the unaccented syllable preceding the tonic segment is the proclitic segment, and the one following it is the enclitic segment. We can also identify instances of reduced tone units or minimal tonic segments. For example, a grade in line 4 is a tone unit consisting of only one prominent syllable, so it is reduced, minimal. Intonation also plays a crucial role in information structuring. This information structuring function refers to prominence allocation and tone selection indicating information value. Prominence allocation depends on the sense selection from the existential paradigm, the context of interaction, and the common ground between speaker and listener. Brazil does not consider grammatical categories to allocate prominences. According to him, it is the speaker who decides to highlight certain words they consider to be relevant after evaluating the shared knowledge between them and the listener. For example, in line 5, Cinderella is prominent because I am introducing the subject of the story, so I consider this information to be relevant. However, in line 10, Cinderella is non-prominent because I have already mentioned her before. So it is part of the common ground between my students and I. So I consider this information to be relevant at this point of the classroom interaction. As I said before, tone selection serves to indicate information value, which may be new, given, or in process. In addition to that, tones also serve to indicate other communicative values, such as the role relationship value, which may be dominant or non-dominant, and the social value, which may be distance or proximity. These last two values are part of the interpersonal function of intonation, which serves to indicate the type of relationship between interlocutors in a certain communicative event. Now, let's see how these different values of intonation are reflected in my tone selection. In the tone unit grade in line 4, I chose the proclaiming tone because it entails new information. My students do not know what my reaction to their answers will be. As this information does not belong to the common ground between my students and I, there is distance between us. This tone also entails non-dominance, since I am just making a comment on my student's response. Then, in the tone unit Good Morning Kids, I use the referring tone, which is usual for greetings. Strictly speaking, this information is given because it is normal that teachers greet their students when the class is going to start. So, it is shared knowledge. This tone reflects non-dominance, since I am being friendly with my students and I want to convey proximity. Then, the tone unit we are going to travel bears a referring plus tone. As regards the information value, raising tones are used when utterances imply or indicate continuation, as it is the case of storytelling. Here, I use this tone to build suspense and raise curiosity in my students. Also, the referring plus is the preferred tone for teachers, as it reflects their dominant role, but at the same time it implies proximity. The tone unit on bears a level tone. Here I am hesitating, so there is information in process. There is also non-dominance and distance, since I am focusing on looking for the story in the book and not in the interaction with my students. Finally, the proclaiming plus is not present in this section, since it is the least friendly and the most powerful tone in English. It conveys doubling information, distance, and dominance. Teachers may occasionally use this tone when telling, for example, when telling off students. Finally, according to Brazil, tone selection also plays an important role in the meanings of questions. For example, in the question, "How are you?" I use the proclaiming tone because I expect the answer to contain new information. That is to say, I am finding out. I really want to know how my students are feeling today. Then, in the question, do you know the story of Cinderella? I use the referring tone because I assume that my students already know the story, so I am not expecting new information to arise from their answer. This is a making sure question.